Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton.
My next guest was born in Austria to parents who had recently lived through World War II. He quickly rebelled against their old world values, joining the protest movement and discovering booze, weed, and psychedelics, all of which eventually led to heroin. He managed to wean himself off smack with a liter-a-day booze habit that he later mitigated with hard labor, and it was only when his girlfriend got pregnant with their first child and he started to attend some 12-step meetings that he eventually got sober. Since then, he has lived a varied life, running a relocation company, going to grad school, building buildings in Brazil. At 62 years old, he is currently finishing his law degree so he can go and advocate for the poor. Won't you please welcome Thomas V.
We're sitting here with Thomas V. I'm recording. So,
Okay.
Where are you from?
I grew up in Schwarzenegger's hometown in Grad, Austria.
Uh-huh.
And born in 1960, so close to the Nazi time still, actually. 15 years after the end of the war.
Yeah.
Parents, World War II generation. And in fact, father, prisoner of war in Russia for a while.
Wow.
Had been volunteered as a 16, 17-year-old.
Jeez.
But things were a little strict around the house, even in the 60s.
Right.
And,
Is that because of do you think that's because of his harsh experience during the war? Like, this is a serious life you're about to lead. Like, you got to be prepared for it?
it's just a culture over there.
Right.
I think it's always been like that. And to a degree, it still is. Austria is very, very white, no real horizon, too many mountains, only one big city,
Right.
And
The big city is Vienna?
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so Graz is a small town, smaller than San Diego. So I didn't really know what I was rebelling against,
But you did rebel.
It felt like I had a suit on that was just 3 sizes too small, and the very different time. Me growing up there in the 70s, gaining some consciousness, the hippie movement going, the long-haired hitchhikers on the side of the road going down to Turkey, and even further in Magic Bus going to India, and I couldn't wait to be with these guys.
And what were your parents doing for work? What was their kind of...
My dad was a town doctor. My mom was a nurse that stopped working once my brother and I had come along.
Right.
And they were respectable people. My father was a drinker though too,
Right.
so he liked to get it on. But my mom was a picture book Al-Anon, and we were a little bit outside of that medium-sized town afterwards, and was it 1976? They sent me to England for the summer, and for the first time away from there, I got loaded for the first time. And
how old were you? You were 16?
16 in the south of England, in Hastings, and a few trips to London. And I took to booze and weed and LSD like a duck to water. It's.
And in 76 in England, I suppose it was pretty it was a party culture there at that time.
Oh
right?
yeah, it was the punk rock days where we're getting going. The Clash and the Sex Pistols and whatnot. And
were you a punk rock kid?
Well, I had a strong political edge, like the straight edge punk rock movement. Mm-hmm. That's actually still going strong. That was my thing. I was very attracted to people who really took. I know people who took militant action, as a matter of fact, and that was rebelling within a society that's that wasn't all that unfair,
Right.
as I know now,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Over there, health insurance, strong unions, there's a real political debate, not just and whatnot. But we just slithered deeper in from our protest movement against whatever the American military presence there, the nuclear power movement. We actually, in Austria, we had a success. We managed to keep the only nuclear power plant ever built from ever opening.
Right.
and things like that. But I should just speak for myself. I slithered more and more into drug use, into heavy, hard drug use. Then later in my early 20s.
So when you came back from England, did you feel like you were changed by that experience of like boozing and
very
partying,
much
and
so.
you were just sort of like, and how did your parents react to that? Could they see that there was like a new Thomas in their household and that it were...
Oh, big time. I refused to cut my hair.
Right.
You know, it doesn't show now, but I had an afro like that within a year. And my father got me a brand new motorcycle.
Wow.
And as the local chief of police later explained me one time, I all of a sudden was a mobile offender, which is why they took my license away after a couple of drunk drivings. And all the academic and athletic ability fell by the wayside real quick. And this became what I did.
Were you a good student up until that point?
I was an excellent student.
Right.
I was an enormous athlete, and I could. My father was. It's a small country, so the professional people are very connected. The old aristocracy and whatnot. I could have had a very, very successful. I would have had I not gotten into drinking and using to the degree that I did.
And what was your drinking and using like? Like what were you into?
As I said, I started out with weed, and that became a habit as if it was tobacco.
Right, sure.
We smoke hash over there, and then just beer and schnapps, and then there was. Then when I got away from my hometown in this town where I was enrolled at university, there was a literary movement going on.
Where'd you go to college?
In Grad. This was a jazz town as well. So there was a few bar rooms that these bohemians, salt of the earth kind of people did their thing out of, and I fit right in.
That sounds amazing.
I enrolled in university but never took an exam. Amsterdam is an overnight train right away, and we did our thing between these two cities, you know, making sure the supply was
steady.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun.
We went down to Northern Africa a lot, where all the weed was grown, where most of it that was consumed there, and it was. Where
you go to Tangier? Is that sort of, or where
we're from? Tangier south into the Rif Mountains, and meeting with not the actual people, but the kids of people that if you associate with them, it's hard to get away from them. It's a lifetime associations, and thank God I never got all the way into that, because it would not have ended well, and even the way it went.
So you're basically like going down there to meet with suppliers to like bring it back to Europe.
And they would have delivered fast boats through the Mediterranean and whatnot, and once you get involved with these people, you're not getting away from them. They know your family, and they make the terms then, or twist the terms. So, but what happened was in the early 80s, after a few years on heroin,
where were you at that point?
I was still in grad, so
But you had
always
dropped out of college.
always rather mobile.
Right.
Switzerland, Spain, Holland.
And did you
base
quit
was
college
Graz.
or just and stay there, or did you pretend that you were kind of still doing
I
college?
was just enrolled to continue to have health insurance, but other than that, I was
right. And when did you
traveling? I don't know what.
First find heroin? When was that first experience?
I was in Switzerland for the summer one time, and a guy that I just smoked weed with, he brought it around. It was a local park, and I just wanted to know what it's like,
sure.
And then I didn't find it as horrifying,
right?
As it was.
Did you shoot it or smoke at that time?
Just snorted a little
right.
bit and then smoked a little bit and came back to Austria. And as luck would have it, a fellow a law student had somebody who sent it from Thailand in thin drinking straws in the walls of boxes,
right.
And the pure stuff came there, and again, not shooting it,
right?
Just snorting it, and little by little, it took a major hold of me, and
right.
then one time we were. Whatever, the box didn't come in time, and we had to really ration the supply, and people saying you're wasting it by snorting it.
Right.
And needless to say, I took my first intravenous dose, and that over a few years then almost did me in a couple of times.
How did the intravenous dose compare to the snorting it or smoking it version?
It just hits you straight up
right.
it's
harder.
Get
right to the high.
The gut,
right.
and you better be knowing what potency it has.
Sure.
I mean, these days more so than ever.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
Everything is so much stronger, and it was a few years that ended in a bunch of people that I was associating with getting arrested, and thank God I was not home when everybody was hauled off, and I got wind of that and stayed away for a long time.
What did they get arrested for? Just for like dealing?
Yeah, conspiracies,
right.
To distribute and whatnot, and I did not get sentenced, although my name was mentioned quite a bit. As I said, I stayed away for a long time, but I went cold turkey, and
wow.
I drank kind of like the guy in what's that movie?
Leaving Las Vegas.
Right. I don't think you could drink like that,
right.
But just to make up for that, and that really did a number on me.
How long did that last to sort of detox from heroin by via booze?
The real detox is a week
right.
at the most. Sure. After that, it's all mental. It's all mental.
Right.
And I relapsed a few times, but never to get fully back on it.
Right.
This massive alcohol consumption.
What was your alcohol consumption like to sort of mitigate the effects? Like a liter a day or something?
It was around that,
right.
And I was starting to lose it mentally, like the AA book says, terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair,
right.
or what pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. These are not just words to me, or being at the jumping off place, and because I was starting to hear things and see things and become very paranoid and couldn't really smoke weed anymore,
right.
and only slept a few hours.
Sure.
And I thought, you better check into into a facility. But then it came to me that if I really told them what I was experiencing, they would keep me.
Right.
I was experiencing, they'd keep me. They would
Never
stay.
let you go.
They'd
Yeah.
say, no, they'd maybe eventually, but
Right.
they would, and you'd have that's a record that stays with you for life. And I wandered around like a zombie, man, for quite a few months, just again in these 1 or 2 bar rooms, where you could be left alone. It was okay to just sit there, but it was like my head was exploding. I don't wish that state of mind on anybody.
Sure.
Literally not on any. It was hell on earth. I was just too chicken shit to.
And
jump,
how are you
off the
paying
next
for
building.
shit at this point?
Well, my parents helped out.
Right.
There were friends. I was always lucky with women,
Right.
and in fact, a woman was instrumental in me getting through / out of this.
Right. How old were you at this
this
point?
period. That's when I'm like 25,
Right.
24, 25. I remember the Olympics had been going in LA, and my mom is visiting my mom. I'm sending her to the pharmacy for some Valium, which she would have needed a prescription for, but they knew her, and I had another relapse, and my brother had already had a suicide attempt behind him, although not, maybe a little bit LSD related, and very dark literature, but not so much the drugs like myself. And this one gal, her father was a geologist, and he had a company that were doing some water and oil prospecting, and she got me in with a very heavy duty physical labor type of job out in the countryside. And believe it or not, that helped me pull through that, having to get up with the crew out in the wilderness early in the morning. In the beginning, I could barely do it because I was so out of it.
Right.
But as I said earlier, I was always a pretty physical guy, a good soccer player and whatnot. Right. So I got in shape, and it pulled me, that structure and being with the gang and just drinking a few beers at night pulled me through that. And that's that amazing. Alone being kept a distant memory.
Yeah.
That horror mental state is worth staying clean and sober a day at a time for the rest of my days. Because that was a close call.
Right.
It was a close call.
And then how did you ultimately get sober? Like completely sober at some point?
In the U.S., there is no way around exposure to 12-step programs for a roaring drinker, drug addict, really.
Sure.
A friend of mine had gotten me a job for a travel agency here. We were doing advertising to get American students to go on bus tours through Europe, postering at universities and whatnot. And I didn't do anything as far as heavy drug use goes here in the beginning.
Where were you living here? Were you in LA?
Yeah, West LA.
Right.
Sepulveda and Venice. In fact, not too far from me here, because I didn't know where to buy stuff, and I came with a company. I was buying weed up here in Hollywood.
Sure, that was a place on Argyle down there was a big.
The place that I went to was like where you come down from the Hollywood freeway there, from the Hollywood Bowl towards Hollywood Boulevard.
Oh, right, sure.
I just knew a street place there.
Yeah.
But anyways, I got a little bit into smoking crack here. I was, I mean, you could drop me in rural Mongolia, and I would
drugs.
Yeah, or I don't have to look for it. It finds me. It finds me.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
And but what happened was one Sunday, somebody had sold me a tiny little $50 piece of soap, if you know what I mean. And I was heavily disappointed, and I'd been drinking all day on top of that, and that the cops were at the house later at night because me and my girl had gotten into a fight, and this led to her hooking me up with a guy that we had both known who had 7 months sober at the time. And actually, the very next day, David, who is still clean and sober, like about a year ahead of me, and as far as time goes, took me to a meeting. She basically threatened me into going to a meeting with him. I had no intention of giving this an honest try or anything like that. She was gonna really leave this time, and I went to a meeting with him, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the West Side Alano Club, which
I've been there,
still going, and
I spoke there just a couple weeks ago.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah,
funny.
I'd never been there before. It's really nice. I had such a nice time there. I have to say.
Back in the day, it was a smoke-filled room. There were some celebrities there, and there were some people there from the Venice Boardwalk and up from underneath the pier, even right, and everything and anything in between.
Yeah,
and I couldn't believe it where I had landed, especially. What they were talking about, and I related from the moment ago, and never heard about the obsession of the mind, allergy of the body. I totally identified immediately this concept of not taking the first drink, and thus never getting drunk. Was like the deepest philosophical revelation to me, and
simple.
I have too simple almost, right? Especially with this Germanic background where we like to figure things out.
Right. It's got to be Wagnerian in its concept.
It's got to be a little more to it. And kept smoking weed for the first 8-9 months in the meetings.
And what year is this now?
This is 1988, September 88. Girlfriend who never thought she could have children gets pregnant a month into me going to meetings. And she is getting bigger. I'm still smoking weed. And then one day I was doing some Finnish carpentry work with a friend down in the marina. I find the guy dead from an overdose in the morning.
Wow. Jeez.
And that was really the turning point. You know, we did what we had to do there, and then I went to a noon meeting, and obviously I had to talk to somebody about this experience. And the guy gave some unsolicited advice, such as better start praying for the obsession to get loaded, to be removed, and say thank you for another sober day at night, and quickly interrupted my but. And weed is a tricky thing. If it's even after a heavy-duty drinking and using career, if it's the last thing you're zoning out on, it was something that I wasn't willing to let go of.
Sure.
But after that, a few weeks of following that guy's suggestion, May 19th, 89, I realized that the obsession had really gone away, and it's never really returned. I've managed to put 32 days together before our first child was born, and we had another one 3 years later, and she kept drinking after the pregnancy a little bit, but she also has over 30 years now, lives in Germany, and we didn't stay together, but applying the principles, if you will, of Alcoholics Anonymous, unconditional love and support, blah blah blah, to the raising of our kids, they turned out good, and I think
it is a huge. I mean, it's so helpful for being a parent to use all of those like ideas about what you control and what you don't control, and what you're responsible for and what you're not responsible for, and just showing up. I mean, as a parent, that's all of it, just showing up, you know.
Absolutely.
And meeting your kids with love. Do you go back to Europe now these days?
My brother is there. My mom is not in good shape, so I was there 6 weeks in the fall of last year. I don't go all that much, but I've also kept in touch with maybe a handful of people that
When you're there, do you go to meetings?
Of course.
What are the meetings like? Because I mean, one of the things you said was that like, the whole sort of 12-step program, it's impossible to avoid here, but I imagine at least back in your youth, it was a lot easier to avoid in Europe. Like, is it more prevalent there now, like sobriety and recovery, than it was 20 years ago? Or is it still like old?
20 years ago, it was actually more prevalent
Right.
than it is now.
Interesting.
It's, AA had been suggested to me ever since I was in my teens, right? Like by friends, family,
Amazing.
even bartenders or whatnot. Interestingly, though, the court system does not
Doesn't send you there.
No, it does not give you
It's funny because I got a DUI when I was 18, I guess, 19, something like that. I was not referred to AA. I was thrown out of school when I was 17 or 18. I was not referred to AA.
Too,
like I was never presented to me until I was. I mean, it was then I was out here in LA, and obviously, as you say, it's hard to avoid. I had friends who were dabbling in it, but it wasn't until I was like 40 and I had fucked things up in a way that I felt like I needed to change things radically that I went and got help. And I had the same experience you had. And once I was in there, I was like, but this is like a revelation to me. Like I had no idea, like
right.
why. And I was really sort of for a while, a little bit pissed that nobody had suggested it sooner. And people have said to me, I'm sure it was suggested to you. You just couldn't.
Same here. And it's belittled a bit, as if you weren't strong enough
to do it on your own. Yeah.
Or why don't you just follow the direction of your therapist?
Right.
Not even if you go into a 28-day tryout program, do you necessarily get introduced to 12-step programs?
Right.
Like a hospital in Bremen near Hamburg, where I used to attend meetings on a Saturday morning when my kids were in high school there, before tryout unit, so to speak, does not have these meetings anymore.
Right.
Wow. They don't. Huh. And friends of mine that are social workers in Austria are telling me the same thing. There's much more of a teaching moderate drinking and using approach.
Right.
And long-term therapy, and in combination with maybe some light or not so light psychotropic medication,
right. Sure.
And stuff like that. It's a shame. And the whole God thing that we here seem to have very little problem with. Very few people make a huge deal out of it. And if you want to, then go to Architects of Adversity or other atheists meetings, right?
Sure.
That's a big deal there.
Or on the other extreme, go to church. You can also go to church if you're not getting enough God in AA, you can do AA and church.
Absolutely, and any other kind of spiritual practice,
right? Of course,
that speaks to you.
Yeah. What's your conception of a higher power?
I don't have a conception per se.
Right.
I'm certainly not a church guy. I grew up the Roman Catholic by birth, but I like Buddhist teachings, Buddhist readings, even some Hindu stuff. It's or Tao writings.
Let me ask it another way then. When they say turn your will over to the power of God as you understand Him, what are you turning your will over to?
To that, what is to the totality of all things, which I'm just a minuscule, tiny little
right.
part of.
That makes sense.
And just like
accepting that.
Yeah, just like an animal that doesn't
right.
have to have a big concept of the surroundings, but just does its thing within
that makes sense
them.
To me.
And
I think I have a similar
I still
approach.
say my little prayer in the morning. Thanks for waking me up sober, safe and sane, blah 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 blah. And I say thank you in a similar fashion. at night.
And then what became of your career in the wake of sobriety? Like, how did your professional life evolve?
I needed to put food on the table,
Right.
because all of a sudden there was a kid, and then there was another one, and somebody had sold me an old truck for $1,000, and I got a relocation service going, and
Right.
And we had a pretty nice little company going with 15, 20 people working. And I was able to buy a house and administered that well. Sold it a few years ago to a guy who worked for me for a long time.
Oh, nice.
And went back to law school, night school. So I just wanted to finish that up from my youth. I did.
You had started doing law when you were in Germany?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
You don't have to get a bachelor's in Europe. You could, in fact, the high school degree there
is
like
the sort of bachelor's
almost
degree.
like a bachelor's here, right? And but as I said earlier, I never took an exam. I always had a strong interest in it, and so I went to night school here, and then actually was hired by them to run their school for a few years, and I'm going to be 62 next year, so it's a little late to get into practicing law in the traditional sense. However, with everything that's going on, all the homelessness,
Totally.
the prison industrial complex is out of control as far as I'm concerned. The fact that we're locking people up here for so long, and so there is work that can be done there, and I see myself working in that field.
That sounds amazing.
The next decade.
Right, that's so cool.
My kid is up. My older kid is up in the Bay Area. Probably moved there in a year or two, and I've always liked it up there. It's little different environment in Los Angeles, although I don't know how I feel about leaving the AA. I have a strong AA support system here, right?
Sure. What's your go-to meeting?
I, believe it or not, rebellious guy that I am, I go to Pacific Group Wednesday night or Saturday night. Helped me a lot when I had a very, very sober, messy situation on my hands. So a good decade ago, and so that group with its rather structured approach helped me to get back on track. So I go to their two big meetings and participate there, and still go to the place where I got sober at least once a week.
Right.
And other than that, I mix it up. I go to a nice men's stag down on Crenshaw Boulevard. Very, very unpretentious group, and we're lucky here. Cool. We get to pick and choose.
Well, that's great. I mean, this has been really, really interesting. Thanks for coming in. If there's anything else that I often cut people off right when they're about to share their deepest, most profound pearl of wisdom, but
it's not a pearl of wisdom, but a couple of things. I'd like to say. One, that AA was a little different when I came around in the 80s. It was less diluted. Now it seems that the recovery industry has moved in, and that I was just reading an article in the Nation this morning about a guy who tried to get off of antidepressants and how difficult it was for him. And so I have, although I try to not be too vocal about them, but I have strong opinions about psych meds having infiltrated the recovery community to an enormous degree. Not that some people wouldn't need it, but I think it's prescribed too easily. And why not get an exercise routine and work the steps first and see if that
changes things for you.
Maybe makes you feel different. And secondly, at least in my case, societal situations have been a big part of me being driven into that rebellious use. Of course, that doesn't take one to the edge unless you have that allergy of the mind, obsession of the body, but that has that societal situation. I would almost call it a form of techno-economical fascism that's grown over the decades that I've been sober, and it's happening without a real opposition, or at least not an opposition on the street, and it is still a big part of me, and I struggle with that.
Do you feel that it is just generally a destructive force in our society and should be opposed, or is it specific to drinking and using, that it's sort of driving people to find solace in ways that like the society doesn't offer? Or is it something else?
Both. And we are, at least in American and more so in European societies as well, we're not really allowing this. We always say, oh, you're the future generation, but we're not really. If this is a dissenting generation that does not want to play ball as far as continued growth, no matter what goes, we don't really allow them to participate. Political candidates who are calling things really by their name don't even make it past primaries anymore.
Well,
we don't really have a choice anymore.
Certainly, all the political candidates we have, at least in America, are so fucking old. Like, it would be nice to see like the next generation, take control of some of the levers of power. But I wonder what if you could articulate like a different vision. What would the alternative look like to you, as far as or an opposing force? I mean, you say growth at any cost. I certainly sympathize with that. Like, we don't need more stuff. Like, nobody needs more stuff. Like, we could.
I think the U.S. would have done well for maybe a term or two with a president like Bernie Sanders.
Right, sure.
A true alternative who, in comparison to European social democrats, is not a radical by any stretch of the imagination. Right. Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. This is a nice. It's also an old man.
Yeah.
But he would have brought in a bunch of. It would have been, and that's what the establishment is scared of. That some real empowerment. What would have happened if Obama had made it his mission to continue to encourage true participatory democracy upon having been elected? Once he was in, he stopped rattling the kids to really go for it.
Sure.
And he became an establishment president. Yeah, he gave us Obamacare, but that's about it as far as I'm concerned. So,
but so you'd like a more sort of social
democrat,
right? Like some
here, everything
wealth
that
redistribution.
Starts with social is. Yeah, and leave all the room in the world for the entrepreneurs, but tax the shit out of them, please.
Right.
Nobody needs to be
$300 billion.
Nobody needs to have the money that
Elon Musk has.
Yeah.
Elon Musk takes his money and decides he's going to buy Twitter. He could do anything, and he buys Twitter. Like, really, dude.
What blows me away is that this is being admired. Even guys like the, I don't want to mention his name, like the 45th president. Ultimately, they're admired when they're really
selfish,
slick, selfish crooks.
Yeah, I mean, I find I'm mystified. I mean, I'm mystified by people in my own tribe that have, following the steps of the 45th president. I'm like, what, are you fucking out of your minds? Like, this guy he's a criminal and he's disgusting. And like, what kind of society are you going to live in where everyone's a fucking Donald Trump? Like, there'll be, people dying in the streets.
I'm scared of the next election. It'll be an experience. You'll see quite a few states will refuse to certify the vote, God. And it'll be drawn out. I go to Mexico a lot. I'm already preparing an escape.
Where do you like in Mexico?
Oh, Mexico is so big. I was just down in Durango, Western country up in the High Sierra, but even further south. Between like Puerto Vallarta and the capital there, Guadalajara. So I came back up Baja California. There's many places in Mexico where I could see myself spending at least part of the
I was
time.
just in Mexico City for Christmas vacation, and I was like, I could see myself living here in a heartbeat, just like open a restaurant in Roma and while away my days smoking cigarettes and watching all the pretty people walk by.
Yeah. I lived in Brazil for a couple of years when I was already sober in 2006, 2007, when the kids first moved to Germany. But Brazil has its own strange...
Bolsonaro. Jeez. What were you doing in Brazil? Did you just keep your business here going and kind of administered it from abroad, or had you sold it by then?
I took a sabbatical first and let somebody manage the business, and I did a semester through UCLA. I was doing an undergrad in sociology in UCLA at the time, and I did a semester at the university in Rio, and then ended up doing a little bit too hasty a construction project down there.
Right.
Almost flushed my money away, but I got away with a slap on the wrist, shall we say. Right. And that was a lot of fun in hindsight. But Brazil is it's a little bit archaic as far as the societal structure goes. They never really made things available to the poor, and it was terrifying watching COVID rip through Rio, and you were just sort of like, how is this ever going to stop? It's going through the poor neighborhoods, and there's no support system, and people still feel like they have to go to work to make any kind of money. And police brutality that we are rightfully complaining about here is completely out of control down there. I mean, the street kids who, of course, what else are they going to do? Resort to stealing things at the markets and whatnot. They're just being eliminated on a regular basis, and everybody looks the other way. It's a brutal society. Wow. It's really brutal. So... Well, Thomas, thanks for coming in. It was great to talk to you. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. It's so interesting that your life, particularly after you got sober, has taken you so many interesting places. I think it's a real testament to the strength of recovery. So thanks for sharing it with us. Best may still be to come. I hope so. Thanks for listening. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/thedrunkalogs.